Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 25 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by The Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today, as always, by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing tonight?
I always say this when we do these review shows. My mood is pretty much determined by the Eagles' success for a couple days at least after Sunday. So I am riding high, just like the Eagles, and we might be even mentioning the word playoffs in this podcast. So to get there from where we were doing this a couple weeks ago, it's been a wild ride.
We need the Jim Mora soundbite. Playoffs. Don't talk to me about playoffs. Yeah, we got a great show lined up for you guys today. We're going to review every single game from the Week 10 slate. Before we do that, though, this podcast, again, it's out there live on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Drop us a comment if you're watching live. We love to interact with you guys live on the air. We'll throw your comments up on the screen and dialogue about it. If you're not watching live, we'd love for you to join us live sometime, but this also goes out to Apple Podcasts the morning after, so you can always follow us there. Please follow, rate, review. It really helps us out. And so let's just dive into it. The Eagles go on the road to Denver. They walk away with a 30-13 victory. Mark, give me your first takeaway from this game.
I think it's got to be Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith's got to be the first thing you talk about, or the biggest takeaway, because he's one of the more, or I guess he's the locked-in piece on this team right now. If you had to say what piece on this team on offense or defense are you most confident will be here in 3-4 years, I think it's probably Devonta Smith. So I guess his development, I know that the focus is so entirely on Sirianni and Hurts's development, and we'll get to that at length, I'm sure. But Devonta Smith being that first-round pick receiver, being that top 10 receiver, and being wide receiver 1 and looking like he's growing into that role and progressing throughout the year, even with that huge brace on his arm. That's a hunky looking brace for a receiver. That's crazy that you can run around and make catches and lost people like that with.
Yeah, that looks like it'd be really hard to play with.
Yeah, that was my first thought. I can't believe this was like his breakout game with that on his arm. It's pretty crazy. Not that he hasn't been good before, and breakout implies that he was doing nothing and now he's breaking out. But that was the most impressive game he played, and we'll get to the touchdowns. We'll get to the big plays. The most impressive play of the day and maybe of the season that I've seen from Devonta Smith is breaking up that interception from Patrick Surtain on that tipped pass from Jalen Hurts, because that shows you everything you need to see out of Devonta Smith. That shows you the football pedigree he has, the football IQ he has, the fact that, a lot of receivers will kind of dog it on those types of plays. If they're 5 yards past them, they'll just kind of let it happen and then maybe go tackle them. A lot of receivers lay out and stuff like that for catches and for stats and for yards and touchdowns. Devonta Smith did it to help the team. Devonta Smith did it to bail out his quarterback, bail out his guy. And that's just an instincts play right there. And that's the kind of stuff you can't teach. And the fact that he jumped the highest I've seen him jump all season, not to make a catch, not to moss somebody, but to break up an interception. That's the type of stuff that you love to see out of a guy that's going to be on this team for years to come.
Yeah, did you see the video of him playing cornerback against Darius Slay at receiver from Eagles practice? I've got it rolling here. If you're not watching live, you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can go Google search this. You can find it. But it's a funny 50-second clip. I said in the game, I tweeted out that Devonta Smith on that play did a better job playing defense on Patrick Surtain than Patrick Surtain ever did playing defense on Devonta Smith. And it's something we talked about on the preview show, that when he faced off against Trevon Diggs, another former teammate who knew his game inside and out, he struggled in that Dallas game. Now, it wasn't just him. Hurts struggled too, but it was a talking point for us on the preview show that if he plays, it's up against another former teammate. How's he going to do? Well, he abused Patrick Surtain, a very good player, a very good young player. He made him look silly all game. His first touchdown pass, he was well covered. He just elevated, made a play. It was good coverage. But like you said, he's coming on. He's got 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. He's certainly playing at the top of his game right now. And it's really good to see, especially for a player that has struggled so much at the wide receiver position. It's really good to see that.
For sure. And, we'll get to the other stuff in the wide receiver position and the other stuff in the weapons. It's funny, in a game that you win 30-13, Devonta Smith's really the only weapon you're walking out of that game feeling great about. It's not like, Quez had a big drop. You're not feeling good about Jalen Reagor at all at this point. And Dallas Goddard was knocked out of the game on a play that absolutely should have been flagged. And I know you feel the same way there. That was crazy in the way that they were really letting Denver get away with a lot. I know that we disagreed a little bit on some of the sideline hits, but that Goddard hit, the fact that wasn't a call, and then the fact that later on, I think it was Gainwell got hit way out of bounds. They threw a flag and then went and picked it up. It was like, wow, they are really letting them play. Eventually, we did kind of get a little payback. I forget who it was. I think it was Johnson, our 7th-round pick this year, laid the wood on, I believe it was Javonte Williams on the sideline. So we got a little payback ourselves. But Dallas Goddard, I know he did his radio show yesterday, if that's any indication on how he.
Oh, you froze. While you're frozen, I'll talk for a minute. Yeah, that hit on game. Oh, there, you're back. You're back. You froze for a minute.
My bad. I don't know where you lost me, but
you're talking about Dallas Goddard did his radio show.
Yeah, he did his radio show. So he said he was feeling better. He said he's still in concussion protocol, but he said he was feeling good. Sirianni said today that not that he expects to see him back, but that he thinks he could be back and he hopes he's back, basically. So that's good. It's a good sign, at least for Goddard, because that looked like that looked like it could have been a brutal, injury or concussion, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just inexcusable. That one wasn't called. Now, you and I disagreed on the Gainwell one. I tweeted that one out because, I hit send and it popped up mine saying it was a good they picked up the flag, and right below it was yours saying you couldn't believe it wasn't a flag. So I screenshotted them both and tweeted it out and said it was the duality of Chalk Talk hosts. But yeah, you mentioned, the weapons. This was the big one here, was the drop touchdown by Quez Watkins, which is a shame because this might be the best throw of Jalen Hurts' career. I mean, clean drop, no hitch, and just drops it in right there. Small window. Should have put the Eagles up. Calling that shot play right before half, that should have put them up big going into half, and they're not able to obviously capitalize on that. It was such a pretty throw from Hurts, and a great first half from Hurts. He was one of the most impressive throws to me too, was that Goddard throw where he slides left in the pocket. I'll pull the clip up here in a minute, but the Jalen Hurts of week 1, of week 2, of week 5, he's bailing out of that pocket, and he doesn't do that here. He stays in the pocket. He slides to the left. He's got pretty good pocket movement, and then he just lays a nice ball out there. And again, it should have been a penalty. It's absurd that it wasn't, but he impressed me, at least in the first half. The second half was a struggle, and I'm sure we'll get into that some as we go.
While we're on this podcast, I just got a notification from ESPN Fantasy calling Devonta Smith a lock starter for now on, talking about the upside and consistency of Devonta Smith and what it means for fantasy. So timely conversation here about Devonta Smith. But yeah, the Jalen Hurts throw, and this is, I let out like a gasp in that play, because as soon as you're seeing the pressure come in here, you're seeing him move to the left, you're assuming that we're punting the ball away. It's 3rd and 11. I didn't have many expectations to convert that play when it started, but to be able to kind of improv and make a play happen, can't believe that's not a flag at the end. But to be able to improv and make a play happen there, that was, that's one of the best plays he's made all season. But it's funny you said that Quez ball that obviously didn't end up being a touchdown on that drop was maybe the prettiest ball he's thrown all year. I would argue the 3 prettiest balls he's thrown all year have been negated, whether that be by a drop. And then the 2, I thought that one deep ball he had to Devonta earlier on in the season, it might have been the San Fran game. I can't remember which game it was, but the deep ball he had to Devonta, that Devonta ended up stepping out of bounds and coming back in. And the week before, the deep ball he had to Reagor, that he stepped out of bounds and came back in. Those might be his 3 best throws of the year. It's funny enough that those 3 haven't been converted and aren't a factor on his stats. But yeah, that's another great throw here. But mainly the main play there is Devonta Smith absolutely mossing him. He wasn't on the You Got Moss segment on Monday Night Football. I was upset. I was expecting to see him on it.
Yeah. So, encouraging performance from the offense. Now, I would have liked to have seen how they would have dealt to the struggles in the second half. Hurts only threw 3 passes in the second half. The last pass he threw was intercepted, and the Eagles just pounded the rock because they had the lead. It wasn't as pretty in the second half, and it didn't need to be because they had the lead and they did what they needed to do, but I would have liked to have seen how they responded to that adversity. Again, overall, really encouraging performance. And now you look at this team, you mentioned playoffs at the beginning. The only road games they have left are New York twice. We travel there to play the Jets and the Giants, and Washington. The Eagles don't have to get on a plane the rest of the year. They've got an easy schedule, and they sit, one game out of the wild card?
Yep. I believe, yeah, I think that they're 5-5, right? The Carolina Panthers, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's there. And, of course, the Panthers got Cam back, and so we'll see how that goes. He's got 2 touchdowns. I picked him up in fantasy as soon as they signed him. So, actually, I think I picked him up in fantasy before they signed him, just on a hope that they would sign him. So I'm resting on that because Derek Carr is dive bombing hard right now. So, and I'm sure we'll get into that later as well. So another note, though, on the offense, Jalen Reagor, over his last, I think it was his last 7 games, has averaged 9.1 yards per game. You combine that with Derek Barnett and his never-ending penalties. And I tweeted this out during the game. I said, you, the average Eagles fan, have had a more positive effect on the Eagles franchise than a pair of first-round picks in Derek Barnett and Jalen Reagor. Just get these guys out of here. I'm sick of both of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it could be worse. You could have the Raiders draft picks. They had to cut both their first-round picks from 2020, but I think this team would be better if Jalen Reagor and Derek Barnett were cut. Yeah. So, and I actually thought that we might be trending towards like a cut of Derek Barnett after that game on Sunday. That third down penalty, and we'll get to the defensive side of the ball. That third down penalty he had, it's just like cue the "It's Always Him" Sirianni clip. But I mean, the fact that he had that play, no one noticed this. I feel like the next third down, that same session, we ended up stopping them again. I think they kicked a field goal. We stopped them again on third down. And at the end of the play, he's getting up off of the running back and he like shoved the running back. And I'm like, I like put my hands in my head. I'm like, what are you doing, Derek Barnett? Like how you just got flagged three plays ago for unnecessary roughness. And you're like, jostling around after the play's over. Like he just doesn't have that, a brain, I guess is as simple as it goes. It's crazy to see the mental mistakes he makes. And I used to defend him at least a little bit in years past because it felt like he was at least creating pressure in years past. And, his sack numbers have never been great. His tackle numbers have never been great. His PFF grades have never been, fantastic. But I at least used to feel like he was at least an intimidating force with his dirty play, and he would get to the quarterback at times. He's not getting to the quarterback at all, and when he does, it's a flag for a late hit at this point. Like the only times he's touching the quarterback is when he's being flagged for doing so.
Yeah. The last thing I want to point out on the offense, I saw this in the game, and I just happened to be screen recording, and I clipped this. Watch Lane Johnson right here, the right tackle. About the time Jordan Howard crosses the 40-yard line. I don't know if you saw this or not, but he steals that block, gives that big emphatic first down. I tweeted that out. I said, I think Lane Johnson's having fun again. Mark Schofield, who was a guest on this podcast in your absence, he actually went back. He's a big fan of Lane Johnson. He went back and pulled several other clips of Lane Johnson over the years celebrating mid-play after he caps a block, and I had no idea. I'm definitely now going to be watching Lane Johnson like snap to whistle to see him do this again because I just thought it was hilarious.
I never thought about it before with the Oklahoma ties. You've got to be a huge Lane Johnson guy. That's got to be your favorite player.
Oh yeah, I love Lane. So I used to say I realized I didn't have any idea how to evaluate offensive line talent. When Lane Johnson went 4th overall in that draft, I mean, I knew he was good at Oklahoma, but I had no idea he was that good. This is before I was big into draft stuff, obviously. But I can't remember the guy's name, but they had a center that year that also graduated. He was like an All-American, like 2-time All-American, thought he was amazing, and he went like in the 7th round. And at that point, I was like, all right, I don't understand how to evaluate offensive line. Now I do. Now it's probably one of my stronger positions because I was like, I'm going to go figure that out. But yeah, I was floored when Lane Johnson went fourth, but I was ecstatic because, I mean, the Oklahoma ties, I was into the Eagles at that point in time. So this is a big Lane Johnson fan here.
No, I'm a huge Lane guy. Definitely one of my favorite players on the team. He did a podcast with Stone Cold Steve Austin right after he won the Super Bowl. As soon as he did that, I was like, I'm all in. I'm sold.
Yeah. So on defense, big play Slay living up to his name. Man, that interception return was insane. I mean, I know everybody.
Fumble return.
Or excuse me, yeah, fumble return. I know everybody was like, when he's running back and forth, they're like, dude, just go down. Nothing good's going to happen. I don't know if you saw afterwards, he said that as soon as he scooped that up, he knew he was going to score because they were in 13 personnel. So he said, there's nobody on the field that can catch me. I didn't even think about that. Which is probably why I analyze. It's probably why I analyze on a podcast 2 days later, so I have plenty of time to process.
I mean, if you're a real Eagles fan out there, you weren't yelling, "Get down, get down!" I was so nervous when he fumbled it on the ground, picked it up, and then he shuffled it again in his hands and like kind of popped free. I was so sure. Yeah, he fumbles there, and then even here again, it like comes up a little bit. I was so nervous about that ball. And then right around here is when you start realizing, after Teddy Bridgewater makes a huge business decision to get out of the way, that's right around the time you realize big play Slay made a big play. And, you know, as someone who has, you know, slandered Darius Slay many times, you know, that is just a huge play that you can't put a price tag on that play. I mean, that is a complete game changer. Even if you just recover the fumble and go down and you have the ball in your own 20, up 20-13 at the start of the fourth quarter, that is so different than taking what it looks like the Broncos are going to score on this drive potentially, and then you turn that into a 7 on your own. I mean, it's pretty easy to say, but when you when you score a defensive touchdown, you're usually going to win the game, and we saw that. So that was huge to see. Davion Taylor making a huge play on that play on the inside. We didn't see it there from that angle, but when they did the replay, you go in and you see Davion Taylor punch that ball out.
He said he said later he didn't even realize he got it out. He punched at it, but he didn't know it came out.
That's crazy. And it's funny that he says that because Merrill Reese, if you listen to his call of the touchdown, he calls it, but you can hear in his voice that he's like a little skeptical, and he goes, "Eagles touchdown, I think. I don't know what I just saw."
Yeah, I thought it was going to come back. I thought they were going to say he was down, but yeah, good game from Davion Taylor. I mean, he forced 2 fumbles, right? I think he forced 2 fumbles. Yeah, he forces 2 fumbles. You know, he had 7 tackles, which was second on the team behind Anthony Harris. You know, he's a guy that, again, he was, you know, not maybe the best draft pick, but a guy that's starting to come into his own a little bit. And, you know, I think it's reasonable to be cautiously optimistic and excited about the progress he's made this season.
I agree. I mean, it's easy to see the difference that putting Edwards and Davion Taylor in the game has had on the defense as opposed to Eric Wilson and, you know, other guys that we were playing there earlier. So, you know, could you criticize the Eagles for not realizing that sooner? Absolutely. But instead, I will choose to credit them for figuring it out and not continuing to play Wilson and getting rid of Wilson and just saying, you know, we have to move in a new direction. And that's what they did. And it worked out well. I don't have too many complaints about the defense in this game. I thought they handled Denver's offense pretty well. I know that you get up early on Denver, and they're the type of team that you kind of want to get up early on because they can't really play from behind, in my opinion. But,
you know the thing people used to say about you know, do you have a good football team? Well, if you lose to Kirk Cousins, you don't, because he doesn't beat teams with winning records. Yeah. Can we do the same thing with the Eagles defense? If you don't complete 75% of your passes, you're just not a good quarterback. Is that where we're at?
Yeah. And I mean, you look at the quarterbacks we've beaten, and then you look at the quarterbacks we've lost to, and it's pretty easy to tell, you know, what teams we're going to perform well and what teams we're going to perform poorly against. I mean, we've lost to, if you take out this, let's take out the San Francisco 49ers game, which, by the way, I think we've talked about before. They outplayed the 49ers in that game, at least for 3 quarters. That should have been a win, and we're going to kick ourselves at the end of the year if it comes down to a win here or there that we didn't win that game, especially if it's San Fran that we're competing with, which looks more likely after last night. But you take out Jimmy Garoppolo. We've lost to Dak Prescott, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Derek Carr. Those are pretty good quarterbacks. And then you look at the quarterbacks we've beaten. We've beaten Matt Ryan, Teddy Bridgewater, Jared Goff, and Sam Darnold. So luckily for us,
the quarterbacks that are coming up are Trevor Siemian, Daniel Jones. I don't know. Zach Wilson.
Daniel Jones again. Taylor twice.
Taylor, Eli Manning, Heineke. and then likely Cooper Rush week 18. So don't play a good quarterback the rest of the way unless the Cowboys play their starters week 18.
The only way that's happening is if they're fighting for home field, which maybe it'll happen, but hopefully they either have that locked up or they don't have a chance at it. And I think that they won't play starters to get a 2 seed instead of a 3 seed or a 4 seed. And I know a lot of people complain. I'm actually curious your thoughts on the 7 seed in the NFL. The reason I always kind of appreciated adding the 7 seed is what it's doing right now in the NFC. There's one team that's out of it, and it's the Detroit Lions. Every other team that's in it, you can talk yourself into if you're a fan of that team. If you're the Giants, Washington, Chicago, Minnesota, Philadelphia, these teams don't usually have a chance at this, but you can look in yourself. You could take a look at the schedule, especially if you look at the Eagles schedule or an NFC East schedule, and you can talk yourself in to those teams making the playoffs. And I also like that it places more importance on that 1 seed. It places more importance on getting a bye. I think that's a, I never really liked that the 1 and the 2 seed basically got the same thing. I understand home field advantage, but getting the 1 seed is basically winning a playoff round. So I like that adjustment. I was wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I was going to say the thing I like most about it is that, obviously playoff football is fun. It's more fun to have more teams, not at the expense of the regular season, but we see it's not doing that. All these games still matter. But what it has done is it makes every game more important for those top teams because the 1 seed is so much more important. And then for your middle of the road teams, it gives them that breath of life too. So overall, I think it brings more meaning to the regular season. And my biggest thing I like about it is that only the 1 seed gets a bye now.
Yeah, I think that it really incentivizes, going all out and not having any slumps in your season and, putting on a 13-14 win season. And it's important because you get a free win. You don't have to deal with if you're in the AFC, the wild card teams, who knows, Buffalo might be a wild card. We'll talk about that, but you don't want to have to deal with these wild card teams, especially in the AFC. So getting that 1 seed, every team is going to go all out for it that has a chance at it. And maybe it wouldn't have been like that in the past. We've seen teams bench their starters at the end of the year. Peyton Manning teams, I know people used to get on Dungy a lot for doing that and not going all out for home field advantage. So that won't happen anymore. Teams are going to go all out because getting that 1 seed is so important. Now, I'd be curious. It's only, I guess, there's only 1 year of data point for it, was last year. So I'd be curious in a couple of years to see, the percentages of 1 seeds that are making the Super Bowl as opposed to years before. I know when we made the Super Bowl, we were both the 1 seed, right? I believe the Patriots and I know we were, but I think the Patriots were the 1 seed as well.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to see if 1 seeds make it more. I'm assuming they will, due to getting a free win.
Yeah, for sure. My last note about this game I want to point out is that with that touchdown, Darius Slay now has as many touchdowns this season as Jalen Reagor. So it's the last thing I want to point out.
Sorry, Dobbs, if you're listening.
I pointed out to him on the post-game show. By the way, I saw that the highest rated receiver by PFF over the last 3 weeks is Devonta Smith. You know who number 2 is?
Who?
Justin Jefferson. Can you imagine if those two were on the same team? But
that couldn't have happened.
We'll let that go. I'll leave that lie. So, you got anything else you want to say about this one before we kick it around the NFL?
It's not like we had a chance to take Justin Jefferson or anything. Don't beat yourself up. But
it's true.
The Eagles have scored 21 plus now in 8 straight games. My team total over 20.5 hit. I already took team total over 21.5 against New Orleans next week. So yeah, hopefully they continue that trend.
All right. Well, let's throw it around the NFL. Thursday night saw the Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Indianapolis to take on the Colts, a game that was closer than maybe we thought. Ultimately heartbreaking because the Colts do take care of business. They win 23-17. The Colts get the Kirk Cousins Award for this year. They have not beaten a team with a winning record this season. They'll get a chance to change that. They have Buffalo and Tampa Bay up next. What did you see on this game?
Yeah, this was I had Indy -10 in this game. This was a game I really liked. Indy, and they did not cover that spread. And it's because Frank Reich coached this game like a coward. And, you get away with that against Jacksonville. He took 2 4th-and-2 field goals inside the 10-yard line in the first half of the game against Jacksonville. Like, you're nervous to pin Jacksonville on their 5-yard line. Like, you think they're going to go 95 yards on you. Like, and that's what always, it boggles my mind that teams are willing to go for it on 4th at like the 35-yard line or the 30-yard line instead of going for it at like the 10-yard line or the 5-yard line. It makes no sense to me. I'll never be able to grasp that.
Let me just say the Jags might go 95 yards because the Colts defense is a disaster. All right, they gave up almost 500 yards to the Jets in week 9. They let a Jags team who's headed for a top 5 pick make this one close. Like, the Colts defense is a major problem. Meanwhile, the Jags defense, it looks a little better each week. Their offense is just a mess, though, and they really don't have the playmakers. Lawrence has looked kind of like a mess. I mean, they need Urban Meyer out of there. We've talked about that for a long time. But I don't have much confidence in the Colts, especially the way the Titans have been playing.
Yeah, the Titans have been unbelievable. Yeah, I think the Colts. I think the Colts are absolutely going to fight for a wild card. I think they're going to be right around that 9 to 10 win range. It just depends on, what happens in the AFC North, what happens in the AFC West. Those two divisions are so clumped up, but it looks like a couple of those teams might be free falling a little bit. I could see the Steelers really struggling in the second half. I could see the Raiders really struggling in the second half. So it really just depends what happens with the wild card. But I think we're past the point of is Indy going to bench Wentz to avoid giving the pickup. I think they only need 2-3 more games of snaps really out of Wentz. And at this point,
the dude skipped the birth of his kid to play in a football game. They're not going to bench him after that. You can't.
Yeah.
Joe chiming in on YouTube, and he says, another fun stat I found, Jalen Hurts has posted a 90-plus QBR in back-to-back games, the first QB this season to do so. No QB has posted a 90-plus QBR in 3 straight games since Lamar Jackson in 2019. So Hurts will have the opportunity to do that against the Saints this upcoming week.
How do you feel about QBR before I give my thoughts?
I feel like both QBR and QB rating are inherently flawed statistics.
Yeah,
but they can be an okay snapshot. It's similar to how I feel about PFF grades. Like I don't PFF grades aren't great, but if I'm trying to get information about an offensive line, I don't have time to go watch. I'll pull a PFF grade and look at it. I kind of look at all those catch-all metrics that way.
Yeah, I agree. And QBR is really slanted. I'm not trying to take away from that stat or Jalen Hurts, and I think you heard that. I'm all in on Jalen Hurts right now. I'm even trending towards, let's use those top 3 picks on defense and maybe move forward with Jalen Hurts. But QBR is really slanted towards rushing quarterbacks, if I'm not mistaken. It really gives a heavy slant to those quarterbacks. And that stat is kind of proven when you say that the only one who's done it 3 straight times over 90 is Lamar Jackson. So I feel like
I feel like all of those catch-all metrics are subpar ways to evaluate, but they're adequate if you don't have time to get into the film, which you don't always have time for. And so they're good for just broad comparisons.
Yeah, I say kind of the same thing with plus minus in basketball. That kind of stuff can lie to you sometimes, but usually when things are on the extremes, like if something is extremely plus or something is extremely minus in the NBA, usually there's something to that. If something is a little different than you might expect it to be, that could be a statistical anomaly. But I kind of think the same thing with QBR and passer rating. If Daniel Jones is putting up like a 30 QBR, that's a bad example, but if a bad quarterback is putting up a 30 QBR, it usually lines up because he's bad. So those stats obviously are flawed, but there is something to take away from them in small sample sizes for sure.
All right. Yeah, now that we hated on Job's stat.
No, I didn't mean to.
he said, I agree too. That's part of the reason he and Lamar have that QBR. Hurts at 494 and Jackson at 639 are the two QBs leading their teams in rushing. And yeah, that QB rating doesn't take into account rushing, but QBR does weight that in, and I think it weights it in fairly heavily.
Yeah, I remember when QBR came up with I think ESPN came up with QBR, and they made it such a big deal when they came up with it that I think they'd sold me 10 years ago or whenever they.
I do like that it's standardized to 100. 156.8 being perfect is ridiculous, but
yeah, I agree that is good. It's a good scale to use. I remember when they came up with it, I thought oh, this is just how we're going to evaluate quarterbacks now. And obviously it kind of has faded away a little bit. But
it's the same thing too, I believe. I think this is right with EPA. EPA per play is slanted towards rushing quarterbacks too, because those scrambles are such high leverage plays, which doesn't mean the stats flawed. You just have to understand looking at it that Lamar Jackson and Tom Brady's EPA per dropback is not an apples to apples comparison.
Exactly.
So. All right, let's move on to more bad news for the Eagles draft picks. Baltimore traveled to Miami and dropped a game in embarrassing fashion. Miami wins 22-10. Miami, they cover zero blitzed in this game relentlessly, and nobody for the Ravens could make a play. In this game, they dialed up 24 blitzes from defensive backs, and they got 20 pressures on Lamar Jackson. Now, Miami is obviously uniquely built their team for this type of defense. It's the type of defense they want to play. Maybe the Ravens could punish that if they didn't have 17 running backs on injured reserve. But regardless, they stymied the Ravens offense. Now, I don't think you can call this the blueprint to beat the Ravens because not every team can play this style of defense. But bad matchup for the Ravens and a bad result for Lamar Jackson MVP people and for Eagles draft hopefuls.
Yeah, this was actually the Thursday night game.
Did I mix them up?
I think you mixed them up because we talked about this. We talked about this game on the preview
you're right.
On Friday. But I think that I think this was the most evidence. This game was the exact evidence I will point to for the rest of time when I say that Thursday night football should not exist. That'll be what I point to. If you're gonna do it, just do Friday. And I get that Friday ratings are worse, but the competitive disadvantage of Friday is a lot less than Thursday. You get an extra day in between Sunday. But realistically, just put all the games on Sunday and Monday. Just stop with the nonsense.
I got people yelling at me on Twitter after this game because I said this Miami pick, it was never going to be a top 5 pick. It's probably not going to be a top 10 pick because they play the Jets, the Panthers, the Giants, and the Jets coming up. Wow. They're going to win some games. And honestly, they've got an outside shot to get a wild card spot. So
wow.
I don't think they're going to, but they've got an outside shot at it. And so, this pick was they were never going to be a top 5 pick. And for some reason, I had people yelling at me about that. Somebody said, you must be a lot of fun at parties. I was like, I don't go to parties. I'm 31 years old and I've got 3 kids. I don't get invited to parties, but
I complained that the picks that we had for Miami and Indy had a cap to them. To start out this year, it looked like those complaints were unfounded. As we're seeing throughout the year, I think that there was always a bit of a cap to where how good those picks could be.
Yeah. Job said, I would love to watch a game on Friday night. Me too. Our local high school team stinks. So I'd love some, decent football.
College football, there's usually one good game on Friday nights, but I would love to have another NFL game or more college games, just something on Friday nights. Friday night's usually a dead sports night.
Yeah. And Zay says Hurts leads the team in rushing because they don't run with running backs a lot. They gave Miles Sanders the ball 2 times in a Cowboys game and 1 to Gainwell. Lamar is just a different breed. Nobody's arguing that Jalen Hurts isn't as good or is as good of a rusher as Lamar. But I think the main reason, obviously, we were very pass heavy at the beginning of the year, but also now that we're running the ball, you look at it, it's like Jordan Howard gets 15 carries, Boston Scott gets 12, Kenny Gainwell gets 5. And so we don't have a feature back. And so, I think Hurts is always going to kind of lead that charge.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen a lot of people arguing on Twitter about who's going to be the running back. when Miles Sanders comes back this week, which could happen, or next week, whenever he comes back. I think it's going to be a full-on committee. I think we're going to be seeing every running back, maybe not Gainwell. I'm sure Sanders will take any touches Gainwell would have gotten the last couple of weeks or going forward. So I think you'll see Howard. I think you'll see Sanders. I think you'll see Boston Scott. And I think you'll still see Jalen Hurts running a lot.
Mm-hmm. All right, rolling on. The Cleveland Browns at the New England Patriots. New England wins this game 45-7. Mark, is this the Mac Jones coming out party? Should Mac Jones have been QB1 in this draft?
I'm gonna go a little different than a different path here than you're going with. I don't think Mac Jones is excellent. I don't think he's been incredible, but he doesn't have to be. That's the whole point of this. Last year, going into that year with New England, I was low on Cam Newton. I thought Cam Newton was cooked. We'll talk about Cam in another game going in a couple games. But I thought, even though I think Cam's cooked, I was so sure that Belichick could drag that team to winning 10 games and competing. But with having a quarterback who just didn't have an arm that could throw at that point and having so many opt-outs on defense like they had in 2020, I think all they needed was Mac Jones to be a game manager who can step up and improve throughout the year steadily, which he has for sure. He's way better that last game that he just played against Cleveland than he was in week 1 against Miami when they lost at home. So
I'll tell you why too in a minute.
For sure. And he's been very good. His stats, you look at them, they're not going to wow you, but me saying that he's probably like the 14th best quarterback right now, probably the 5th, somewhere in that 10 to 15 range. He's definitely the most NFL ready and the rookie that's playing the best. He's obviously in the best situation by far out of those guys. So it's hard to compare situations, but on Saturday before this Browns game, I was working at Fox PHL, The Gambler, and there was a conversation we were having about who is going to win the AFC. Like, what is the AFC right now? The Chiefs, obviously, that was before they had their big coming out party. And it was coming off of the Bills losing to the Jags last week. So I was kind of looking at it, and I looked at the odds, and the Patriots were plus 1,500 to win the AFC. And I was like, I'll get in on it. So I placed a bet on the Patriots plus 1,500 to win the AFC. Obviously, they come out and they smack the Browns, who were my preseason Super Bowl pick. And it makes me feel way better about it. It's jumped to plus 1,100. I'm not taking the Patriots to win the Super Bowl because I think Mac Jones is a top 5, top 10 quarterback. I'm taking them because I think all he needs to be is a top 20 quarterback because they're good everywhere. They might not be great anywhere, but they're not vulnerable anywhere. Where you thought they'd be vulnerable is rushing defense. They just shut out the best rushing offense and one of the best rushing O-lines. I know Chubb wasn't there, but they shut down the Browns offense, which relies on the run. And that would have been the exact type of team that you'd expect to take care or to kind of handle New England's defense. Belichick's the best coach in football still. I know I said a couple weeks ago that it was Sean Payton because I was questioning some late game Belichick decisions. I've seen enough. I'm back on the Belichick's the best in football train. This is his Sistine Chapel. This is his magnum opus. Like this is, I thought it was last year dragging that team to 7-9, doing what he's doing with this roster. Who's the best player on the roster? Matthew Judon?
Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like this
another OU guy, by the way, so I'm not biased.
Yeah, there you go. But this is exactly like this is one of those like early Belichick teams. It feels like because like Brady wasn't the star he became when he was a young up and coming quarterback when they were winning their first couple of Super Bowls. He was kind of a game manager, and so this is very reminiscent of those early Patriots teams where Belichick kind of started this whole dynasty. And I get the whole. It's cliche to say that Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl lit a fire under Bill Belichick, but I think it's pretty clear that it did.
Oh, yeah, you can tell by how they spent money in free agency last year.
Exactly, and you look at the weapons that Mac Jones has, and he has none of them look fantastic. None of them are like, oh my God, he's got AJ Brown or Julio Jones like the Titans have, but they have Damian Harris, who's turning into a stud, Ramondre Stevenson, who you just mentioned, who's been great. And then at weapons for passing, you've got Kendrick Bourne, a player who's really stepped up, a guy I've always really liked. Nelson Aguilar, who they gave a bunch of money to, and he hasn't been that bad. He steps up in moments for them. He's a nice third down receiver. And then you have Jacoby Myers, who has really stepped into a role for them. Had his first touchdown of his career. He was breaking records for catches and yards without having an NFL touchdown. But he finally got a touchdown in that blowout against Cleveland. And then at tight end, you got Hunter Henry, who had 2 touchdowns in this game, I think. And then you got Jonnu Smith. So they might not have a top tier option or a wide receiver 1, but they've got 5 like second or third options. So I think that that's something that New England's going to be able to figure out the rest of the year while Mac Jones improves. And while Josh McDaniels, one of the best play callers in football, is at the helm and with Bill Belichick overseeing him. Like, there's so much institutional trust to believe in this Patriots team. I believe in the coaching staff to get this team ready to be a Super Bowl contender in a weak AFC.
So we're gonna have to fly through the rest of these games, but here's the Mac Jones take. So he has definitely gotten better as the season went on. Why? It's not just that he is getting his feet under him more. He was always the most pro-ready quarterback in this draft, and that's not revisionist history. Like, if you go back to our pre-draft stuff, I talked about Trevor Lawrence, generational talent, but so much of what he did at Clemson was RPOs, bubble screens, throwing behind the line and spreading it out, letting his elite playmakers do work. Doesn't mean he's not a good quarterback, but I said he was going to have a perhaps difficult transition. You had Trey Lance, 1-year starter in an FCS program. You have Zach Wilson, who neither one of us ever liked, Johnny Manziel basically is his comp. He runs around, he doesn't play in structure, and he launches it deep like Mormon Manziel. And then you look at, honestly, Justin Fields was the second most pro-ready quarterback in this draft.
I thought he was first. And
you could make an argument for that. But so at Alabama, at Alabama, Mac Jones, what kind of a quarterback was he? They ran a lot of heavy personnel. They ran play action, downfield, vertical passing. He shows up in New England, and they tried to immediately put him in a Tom Brady offense. The West Coast, quick passing, it didn't work. You can go and look at his ADOT week by week, and you can see they have transitioned to a more vertical game, and now they're working it back down as they kind of blend those systems together, and it is working. And so, like, at the beginning of the year, everybody was saying Mac Jones can't push the ball downfield. The issue was never that he couldn't push it downfield. It's that they weren't allowing him to try, and it's the system that he was set up for. And so now, Job says, what is Mac Jones' ceiling? I don't think Mac Jones is ever going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league, but I think Mac Jones can easily be a top 10 quarterback in the league as long as he's able to play in that system. I mean, you talked about the weapons. Imagine if they had an AJ Brown, if they had a Julio, well, maybe not Julio this year, but if they had a true legit number 1 receiver, how much that would help him. And so, shockingly, to cap that off, it's November. The Patriots stumbled out of the gate, and they're figuring it out just like every single year.
So just a couple names that I'd rather have Mac Jones than. I'd rather have Mac Jones than Baker Mayfield. I'd rather have Mac Jones than Kirk Cousins. I'd rather have him than Ryan Tannehill. I'd rather have him than this version of Derek Carr that we're seeing. I'd probably, would you rather have him? No, you probably wouldn't rather have him than Justin Herbert. But he's probably
I
right
draw
outside.
The line there.
Yeah.
I draw the line at Justin Herbert slander.
He's probably right outside the top 10. And that's pretty impressive for a quarterback at his age, obviously. So, I guess my last question before we move on, I think we'll spend less time on a lot of these other games coming up. But did Tua's rookie year and kind of him going over Herbert and that looking like such a mistake, do you think that hurt Mac Jones?
I don't think that hurt Mac Jones so much as just the class that he came out in. I think it was more a byproduct of I never got it with Zach Wilson, but I saw where people are excited by his cannon arm and the big plays. They're infatuated with that. I was obviously very taken with Justin Fields. He was my QB2 in the draft. He was such a great downfield passer, but I really think it was just like, if you want a downfield passer, Justin Fields was the best at that. And so that's Mac Jones' strength, but he's not the best in the class. He doesn't have the mobility. And so I think it was a lot of just the class he came out. If he came out in this year's QB class, he's going top 5.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Okay, let's roll on now. We're going to have to go lightning round here. So we'll start with this one. Atlanta travels to Dallas and gets shellacked. Dallas wins 43-3. Dallas sets a franchise record scoring 29 points in the second quarter. That's the most points they've ever scored in a quarter. Their next 3 games are Kansas City, the Raiders, and New Orleans. So they're in the hunt for home field advantage. They need to win. There was a Josh Rosen sighting in this game for Atlanta. That's how bad this game was. And I got nothing else to say about it.
I will just say, I was talking on here about how Matt Ryan, I made a guarantee that he would never quarterback a team with a winning record again. I was getting a little nervous because he's at 500. I'm no longer nervous. I'm not nervous about that anymore.
All right. So Buffalo at the Jets. This game was also a blowout. Buffalo wins 45-17. It was the first 100-yard game of the year for Stephon Diggs. Josh Allen was 9 of 13 for 271 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception on 10-plus yard throws. And so it's good to see him hitting his stride there. And you have to wonder, do the Bills have the best defense in the league? They entered the day leading in turnover margin, and they forced 5 turnovers. They held the Jets to 70 rushing yards without starting defensive tackle Star Latulele. So, do the Bills have the best defense in the league? It certainly looks like it from where I'm sitting.
I think the Bills are really hard to evaluate right now. That's where I'm at with the Bills. If you look at the Bills' schedule, they've blown out really bad teams. They've blown out the Chiefs too, so they did get that big win. And I think they have one other impressive win. Every win that they've had has been a blowout. They've pretty much blown out every game that they've won, and that's why their point differential is so staggering right now. I think that they're first or second in the NFL in that category. But if you look at their losses, they've been in 3 tight games to I think one was to a bad team, but the other were 2 decent teams like the Colts. I think the Bills might have a bit more problems offensively than we thought coming into this year. They refuse to fix that running game, and I'm not sure that they have a reliable guy after Stephon Diggs. I know Sanders has stepped up here and there, but obviously this is not the game to talk about Bills concerns. I think this is. I'm really interested to see Colts Bills next week for both teams. Are the Colts real in being able to compete with Buffalo, and can Buffalo kind of just handle business against a pretty good team? It feels like they've played more cupcakes than anyone in the NFL. It seems like they have a 15-point spread every week. They're favored by 15 against Jacksonville or Houston or Miami or the Jets. It seems like they just play these teams all the time.
Meanwhile, the Jets are on pace for 2 franchise records right now. They are allowing 32.9 points per game and 400-plus yards per game, both franchise worst. So congrats to the Jets. They are setting records this season. Next, we'll go to New Orleans at Tennessee. Tennessee wins this one 23-21. There is a horrific roughing the passer penalty on a Ryan Tannehill interception. Overturns the play. They end up scoring a touchdown. That is a 7-point swing. The Saints should not have lost this game. Pathetic officiating on that one. However, New Orleans loses after failing to convert a 2-point conversion after missing 2 PATs. So you can't put it all on the refs. There was time to overcome it, but the officiating was horrific. Meanwhile, the Titans' pass rush is on a tear. They have 27 sacks through 10 games after only having 19 all of last season. But from where I'm sitting, their offense has got to step up. They can't rely on the defense to be this hot every game. Eventually, it's going to run out. But we sit in a weird world right now where the Titans are the 1 seed in the AFC.
And we sit in a world where they may be the 1 seed. You take a look at their schedule. They have a really, really easy schedule to close out the year. I don't think it's repeatable necessarily. I don't think it's real. But maybe this team could kind of fraud their way to 13-4 without Derrick Henry and get a 1 seed. But I think when the playoffs,
get Henry back for the playoffs.
Well, yeah, if Henry's back for the playoffs, then they're real. But without Derrick Henry, I just don't see this offense being good enough to compete with the rest of the AFC. I'll tell a fun gambling story here for this game. Tennessee was -2.5. And I know that they did have that terrible call that really helped them win. Tennessee was up big in this game, and they were up for a lot of this game. So it's funny that they were -2.5. New Orleans goes and scores the touchdown to pull within 2 points with a minute left in the game, and they go for the 2-point conversion. It's funny because if you had New Orleans +2.5, you're rooting for New Orleans all game. But then when it's a 2-point conversion, you're then rooting for them to not get it so it doesn't go to overtime for the chance to lose. So it's fun. If you had Tennessee, you're then rooting for New Orleans to get the 2-point conversion. So just gambling's incredible. Like you can be rooting for New Orleans all game, and then because of a weird shift of fate, like you end up rooting for Tennessee on a play. It's just funny. I love gambling.
All right, moving on. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to Washington, and they drop this one 29-19. The last three people with 350 all-purpose yards against Tampa Bay are Taylor Heinicke, Dak Prescott, and Taylor Heinicke last year in the playoffs. So my takeaway is that whoever matches up with Tampa in the playoffs needs to trade for Taylor, Eli Manning, Heinicke. Is he just like the next Eli Manning? There's just a bad quarterback that can beat Tom Brady.
I told you on Friday that he was going to compete in that game. I took Washington's spread. I mean, he's a Buccaneer killer. It's insane. I mean, it's crazy. That 19-play, 80-yard, like close to 11-minute drive to finish the game. I mean, that's the drive of the season. That's the drive of the year right there. It felt like that just would not end. Like they kept showing that on Red Zone, and it was just these 3-yard outs, and then you get a run, and like the way they were able to just go right down the field. And by the way, they didn't run the ball well in this game. This was a game that Taylor Heinicke and the defense won them. The defense turning Tom Brady over, and Taylor Heinicke going 26 for 32, 256 yards and a touchdown. I mean, this was an incredible performance from Taylor Heinicke. There's really no other way to say it. The Heinicke Hive is feeling good after some rough weeks over the last 2 months.
And shout out to Ron Rivera, who they scored to go up 10 with 29 seconds left, and he called a 2-point conversion play that was actually just a kneel down. The reason being, you try the extra point. If they blocked it and ran it back, it's now an 8-point game. And so a smart analytics move from an old school coach that you wouldn't expect to do that. So I liked seeing that. The Bucs, off their bye week last year, they looked unstoppable. This year they got embarrassed. Tom Brady is 1-3 now this season without Antonio Brown, which might be an oversimplification. But you think back through Brady's career, the receivers he likes, the Wes Welker types, these two-way go, quick slot receivers, and that's the role that Brown plays for them a lot. And so I think it's worth noting that if you can force Brady into that outside passing game, you can maybe slow this offense down.
I will say that I'm not nervous about Tampa Bay.
No, I'm not either.
I've seen a lot of that out there, though. I've seen a lot of that, like, I'd be nervous about Tampa Bay. I'm not there at all at this point. I still think that they're, I'm not nervous about the Rams either, and we'll get to them. I think those two and the Packers are really the class of the NFL and the NFC.
Yeah. Okay, moving along, Detroit at Pittsburgh in a game that laughably ends in a tie. Najee Harris said after the game that he didn't even know it could end in a tie, so he gets the Donovan McNabb Award for this show. Here's a fun stat for you. Jared Goff's average depth of target was 4.8 yards, and his expected completion percentage was negative 11.8%. Throwing that short, he managed to complete 11.8% less of his passes than you would have thought. And the thing that just encapsulates this game perfectly is that in an overtime game, there were 6 possession changes and nobody could win this game.
This was an all-time bad game of football. I mean, there's no other way to say it. This was an all-time bad game of quarterback play. Jared Goff in this game got thoroughly outplayed by Mason Rudolph. And anytime you can say that Mason Rudolph thoroughly outplayed the other quarterback, that's a problem because Mason Rudolph's not an NFL quarterback. I don't really even know if he's a backup at this point. So I don't know if Jared Goff's in the league in 2 years. I really don't know if he is. And that's a shame. He seems like a good guy. I mean, he was a number 1 overall pick. It's pretty crazy to think about. I don't have much to say on this game other than what a joke. The Steelers are such frauds. It's a shame that the NFL gave them a win against the Chicago Bears, and now that win will put them in playoff contention for the rest of the year. If this Steelers team makes the playoffs, it's an affront to football.
TJ Watt got his 62nd career sack in his 70th regular season game. He only trails Reggie White for the most sacks in the first 70 games, and he is 1 sack ahead of big brother J.J. Watt, who had 61 in his first 70 games.
I have a question for you on J.J. Watt. Who do you think is a better football player, prime J.J. Watt or prime Aaron Donald?
Mm.
Or who's more impactful?
I'd go Aaron Donald.
I don't even think it's particularly close.
Yeah.
I would go Aaron Donald. I argue about this with a friend all the time.
Yeah, when you have a guy that's that dominant that plays inside so much, like that dominant of an interior defensive lineman is always more impactful than that dominant of an edge rusher.
Agreed.
Well, I say always. There's never been one like Aaron Donald, so it's hard to say an always, but yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, lightning round here. Minnesota at the Chargers. Minnesota wins 27-20. Kirk Cousins is 5 of 6 targeting Justin Jefferson, 10-plus yards downfield. He's 1 of 6 targeting anyone else. So Justin Jefferson is their deep passing game. Pretty impressive for a guy that can only play the slot, I might add. Meanwhile, the Chargers are wasting this season because they cannot figure out how to stop the run or how to let Justin Herbert push the ball downfield. His ADOT in this game was 5.7 yards.
The Chargers are a weird team. I can't really get a read on them other than the fact that they like to play 27-20 and 27-24 games. Like, it just seems like every game they play is going to be close. They might win some. They might lose a couple. We saw them beat us. They lost to New England in a close one. They lost to Minnesota in a close one. And I was wrong about the Minnesota fans not taking over that stadium. They did. And it just seems like no matter what, they are not going to have a home field advantage. And it's a serious problem.
Yeah. All right. Carolina at Arizona. Carolina wins 34-10. My only real takeaway from this game is that Arizona stole a win last week with backups, and they couldn't do it again. If you tell a playoff contending team your backup quarterback and is going to play for 2 games and your top receiver is going to be out for both of them and you can go 1-1, would you be happy with that? They probably would be. It stinks for them that they lose some ground on Green Bay gains some ground on them, I guess I should say. But all in all, you hope Kyler gets back and they get back to rolling.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to say about this game other than the fact that Cam is back. I mean, I don't think Cam's good. I don't think he has an arm at this point of his career. He's had a ton of injury issues. I used to be a huge fan of Cam.
Oh, you froze again.
I do think that there's my bad. I think that the team got ready to play and galvanized behind Cam. A lot of those guys grew up watching Cam, and a lot of those guys played on the team with him a couple years ago. A couple of them. You saw McCaffrey. McCaffrey was like celebrating like a madman with Cam after, and they obviously played together a couple years ago. So I don't know if that's something that lasts long term. Is this something where Cam Newton kind of gave them an injection of hope? And maybe Cam Newton doesn't have to be that good. Maybe Cam Newton can kind of just be average and be good around the goal line and good in the red zone. And that's still probably better than what Sam Darnold was doing and what PJ Walker was doing. So the roster's pretty good in Carolina. There's a lot to like about the Carolina Panthers roster. It's just, can Matt Rule and whoever's playing quarterback kind of not screw up the rest of it enough to kind of win some games. I'll be really interested to see Carolina Washington this week. That's low key one of the games I'm most excited for.
Okay, Seattle at Green Bay. Green Bay wins this one 17-0. A disgusting game to watch. Both Rodgers and Wilson looked rusty. They both threw red zone picks, which is the first time this season both teams have thrown an interception in the red zone. It was the first time in Russell Wilson's career he's been shut out in 166 starts. The Packers defense is on a tear lately. They've faced Kyler Murray, Patrick Mahomes, and Russell Wilson in the last 3 games and have held them to 11.3 points per game. But it's largely been off of turnovers. If you look at their EPA per play, things like that, their metrics aren't lining up there. So we'll see if they can stay hot. Basically, they said after the game, Russell Wilson couldn't even take snaps under center. And in that case, you shouldn't have played. There's just they were better. They were better off with Geno Smith under center. At 3-6, they can't win the division. Now, they do have a favorable schedule. Maybe they could go on a run for a wild card spot if they can get healthy. But overall, you said the Lions and Steelers game was the worst game of the week. This one was right behind it.
It was. I would say I'll keep this short. The Packers defense kind of showed me that they might be a Super Bowl contender. I wasn't taking them very seriously until this game, and that's funny because it was an ugly game and their offense played terrible. But the fact that their defense was able to tough out like that, and I know Russell Wilson was hurt and definitely too hurt to play, but they still have some weapons on that offense, and they were able to contain all of them. So I was really impressed with the Packers defense, and it's made me take them pretty seriously at this point.
All right. Kansas City at Las Vegas. Kansas City wins 41-14. As much of a struggle as this season has been for the Chiefs, they are at 6-4 and they sit atop their division. The defense has allowed 15.6 points per game in the last 5 games after allowing 32.6 in the first 5 games. This is a team that I feel like they're going to get into the playoffs, and everyone is going to sit back and look at the rest of the AFC West and say, how did you let this happen?
It's funny. I was told that Patrick Mahomes was figured out. I was told that the Chiefs, their era was done. Seems like we might have buried a 6-4 team a little fast. And they were getting buried at 5-4. So me saying that isn't revisionist history. And I was told that Mahomes, might not have any more playoff success on Twitter a couple weeks ago when referencing the fact that everyone should calm down because he had lost an AFC championship game that he would have won with an offsides in his first year, won a Super Bowl, and then lost the Super Bowl. I was told, it's not like, well, that's all the team success he's going to have after that contract. They're 6-4, and it feels like they've had a nightmare season.
Here's a stat for you. Next Gen Stats charts in rhythm touchdown throws, which is defined as a throw between 2.5 and 4 seconds from the snap. Patrick Mahomes threw his first in rhythm touchdown, according to Next Gen Stats, since week 4 in this game. And so, the structure hasn't been there with the offense. And so it's coming back. We'll see what happens here. Meanwhile, the Raiders, they were 6-4 in 2019, and they dropped 5 of their last 6 games. Last year, they started 6-3, and they dropped 5 of their last 7. It just looks like we're heading down the same road we go down with the Raiders every year with the hot start, and then it all just falls apart.
Yeah, their former coach would be proud of this late season swoon. That's kind of his identity as a coach at the end of his tenure. So, I think the Raiders are going. They are going down fast, as fast as possible. They have a game coming up against Cincinnati next week. It's a loser leaves town matchup, in my opinion. Loser of that game, you can kiss your playoff hopes goodbye in the AFC, in my opinion. And I think Cincinnati's going to roll there. I think this is the point of the season where the Raiders just go into the tank. I think that, their season's over, in my opinion. That game showing no fight at home against Kansas City there, that said everything I needed to say after a brutal Giants loss.
Okay, and then on to the Monday night game, we had the Los Angeles Rams against the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers win 31-10. San Francisco is now 4-5 with games against Jacksonville, Minnesota, and Seattle coming up, teams with a combined record of 9-18. And so San Francisco is also prime. They could make a run for a playoff spot here in the NFC. Meanwhile, the Rams offense took a step back again as Stafford struggled again. On defense, they gave up 2 90-yard scoring drives. Where are you at with the Rams now?
Yeah, there's reason for concern, and there's definite things to point out. But they throw a pick when they were driving on the first drive pretty well. They throw a pick, and then the Niners go and score, and then you throw a pick 6. At that point, it kind of felt like the game was over. And it felt like they worked themselves into a really bad game script way too early. And once you're down 14-0, I think Shanahan and the Niners defense was good enough and smart enough to know what they had to do to salt the game away, and that's exactly what they did. I think that's just one of those games. And I said that a couple times to excuse the Rams this year. They're still my Super Bowl pick. I still think they're going to win the Super Bowl, and that might sound crazy after this game, but I'm trying to not be too reactionary this year, especially with all the good teams have had an ugly loss or two at this point. It's not a year where, the Steelers were 11-0 last year. A lot of teams were 9-1, 10-1. That's not this year. It seems like everyone's got 2-3 losses at this point. So everyone's got an inexcusable loss. So you're no matter what, if you're saying a team in the NFL is good, you're making excuses for them.
Yeah, I think the Rams are a finesse team. They look pretty with the pre-snap motion and the light boxes, and we want you to run on us. And they've been punched in the mouth 2 games in a row now. They've been dominated in the trenches. You look back at that game, they gave up 156 yards on the ground. You go back to the game before, and they didn't give up a lot of rushing yards to the Titans, but they took 5 sacks. And so I feel like this is a team that they're losing the battle in the trenches right now. And I don't expect it to stay that way. I don't expect a team with Aaron Donald on it to lose the battle in the trenches a lot. You add Von Miller into the equation. I think it's perfectly reasonable for them to have a 2-game stretch of struggles and to bounce back. We see it from teams all the time. If it continues into week 11, week 12, I'm going to start to get concerned. But right now, I have confidence that Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford are going to figure this thing out.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that's going to about wrap this up. Our week 10 preview. We'll be back later in the week for our week 10 review. We'll be back later in the week for a week 11 preview. Mark, before we get out of here, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, it seems like I do this on the draft every week, and I do it on quarterbacks a lot, but I'm going to stick in that. This quarterback draft class, the more and more I look into it, the more and more I think that it's 2018 all over again. And, will these quarterbacks go as high? I don't know. But I think that there's a lot of similarities with a lot of these guys. I think Sam Howell is Baker Mayfield. I think Carson Strong is a non-athletic Josh Allen. I think Malik Willis you can squint. And if you're drafting Malik Willis, you're hoping you're drafting Lamar Jackson. And then after that, you have Matt Corral and Kenny Pickett. I haven't exactly been able to I guess you could compare Corral. Actually, now that I'm talking it out, you could compare Corral to Sam Darnold. He's like the Heisman candidate. He's the high recruit. He threw a lot of picks last year. So you could maybe that'll talk me out of Corral that I'm comparing him to Darnold. But I would say that right now where I'm at, Carson Strong proved on Friday night to me that he's my QB1, and I don't think McShay, Kuiper, or anyone out there really agrees with that. Malik Willis would be QB2 because I can squint and see Lamar, like I said. Then after that, I have to do a little bit more evaluation of Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, who those guys were the guys Howie was evaluating on Friday night at the game, and Matt Corral. So those are the 3 guys that I'm going to be focusing on, kind of crunching tape this week of.
All right. My final thought. I finished season 3 of Stranger Things. I am now caught up to live on a show that started like 4 years ago. And now, I don't know if you remember that Netflix commercial from a few years back about the show hole. I feel that. I'm in a show hole right now. So if you guys are faithful fans out there, if you have some show recommendations, hit me up on Twitter. I will add them to my watch list because I'm currently looking for something good.
I'm rewatching Seinfeld and How I Met Your Mother for like the 300th time. So if you've never seen either of those shows, I would say that give them a watch.
All right, we'll check it out. So thank you guys as always for joining us for episode 25 of Chalk Talk. Job, Zay, you guys that were in the chat, thank you for chiming in. We enjoy getting to interact with you guys. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and let's be honest, we know that you do, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. Give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It'd really help us out. You can follow us on Twitter. Our handles are right here. I'm at @halfandhalf_TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. So for me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.